So I'm here talking to Glenn about our Veri project. Glenn, we often talk about the shear zones and the boudinage structure. Could you explain what we're talking about when we talk about those boudins?
Yeah, well, the Veri deposit, it's a Veri prospect. It consists of some extremely high-grade boulders that were mainly sampled in the streams and so resistive to erosion. And those boulders are composed of nickel sulfides of hazelwoodite minerite variety, which yields the high nickel values. We conducted a program recently where we went out to actually see is there continuous continuity of these boudins. But what we found was shear zones of significant widths up to 50 meters wide that actually contain isolated these boudins, which some examples here. You'll see, Jason, that the outer these are all stream float, and the outer surface is actually smooth, so you can actually see they're formed as boudins in shear zones. And here's another example where the outside shape is smooth. Again, a boudin that was created in a shear zone, actually deformed in the shear zone, but with the high-grade nickel sulfides. And what we haven't as yet found continuity to the actual loads themselves, but what we found is the frequency of the boudins within these shear zones is quite high. And so here's a couple of examples, centimetre scale through there. So this boudin is only 10 centimetres by 4 centimetres. And over here, a slightly bigger scale where the boudin is, say, 30 centimetres by 10 centimetres. But this is where our guys have just dug down blind in some areas, that following up some work done by Goldman X. So for examples of the work that we've done of recent times, Goldman X had some trenches where they stopped their they got 7.8 meters at 3.2% nickel. And as we talk about later, these are unusual nickel sulfides, unlike say magmatic komatiitic hosted magmatic sulfides within nickel sulfides within Western Australia. The difference is these do not have pyrrhotite. They're just they're straight nickel sulfides, and the mineralogy makes up of hazelwoodite, which is about a 70% nickel sulfide mineral, minerite, which is the same, and then we've got these characteristic green serpentinite to garnerite, which is also nickel bearing, and it makes it actually very visual in the rock type to pick up the floats. But the other association is they actually have gold associated with it. So we've got 23% nickel in this sample here, and we've got 11 grams gold associated with it, and 12% nickel and 1.4 grams per tonne gold associated with this sample. So that trench I mentioned of Goldman X of 7.8 metres at 3.17% nickel, that also had 1.32 grams gold associated with it. And our guys were just to say, why did the Goldman X trenching stop where they did? So we went along strike of the Goldman X trenching, and pretty well the two major areas where Goldman X had trenched, our guys were finding significant boulders of nickel sulfides along trend. We haven't assayed this, but with the nickel sulfide in there, my estimate would be well over 10% nickel. The reason we didn't assay this material is we'll be going back to trench over the top of it and get more accurate grades. So that was from a trench to the north, and a trench to the south where Goldman X had in their trench sampling got 7 metres at 4.41% nickel. We stepped out about 20 metres further along strike from that trench, and where there's a little bit more float sunk down. And again, the amount of nickel sulfides in here, we don't have an assay, but that's probably greater than 20% nickel. And the green here is the garnerite, so very visual mineral. You can see it forming in late fractures coming all the way through the nickel sulfides. As far as geology goes, the background material is a dunite, so it's all cumulative texture olivines. And one thing that's characteristic, which is helping us in the regional exploration, the olivine has been recrystallized and actually grown as these elongate cream-coloured crystals. So that helps us actually in a regional sense to say elongate crystals, take a sample, and you can see here, although the nickel sulfides are far less visual, this was still 4.6% nickel and 1.4 grams gold. So we're starting to actually understand the character of these systems, knowing what to explore for, and our aim next is to say doing some 50 to 100 metre wide trenches to see the frequency of these boudins over the widths of the shear zones.